So we got a question on YouTube from LS3 Atomic Vet, who subscribed to us over a year ago.
That's
so
pretty cool.
That's a very loyal subscriber. They said, love your content. I need help. I'm going to the South Island of New Zealand in October 2021. Flying Air New Zealand. Any ideas when it would be the best time to purchase the flights to save the most money? Thanks.
So there are multiple airlines to fly to New Zealand. You don't necessarily have to fly with Air New Zealand. You have been asking a lot about Air New Zealand, and you definitely don't have to just use that one airline. There are a lot of other airlines. Prices are rather competitive, and you may not need to go for like that main New Zealand airline, because I don't think I ever took Air New Zealand to come into New Zealand. We used a lot Air New Zealand to fly to some of the South Pacific Islands or to fly within New Zealand. But I don't think, have you ever used Air New Zealand to actually get into New Zealand?
Yes, you have. One time I have, and another time I've used Cathay Pacific or Cathay Pacific.
Yeah, Cathay Pacific, which is in Hong Kong. Yeah.
Yeah. So I used them once, but I always go for what seems like the best deal, and it's not always Air New Zealand that's the best deal, and obviously prices do fluctuate, but it's always good to compare your options, obviously.
Okay, so what I've done for you is that I loaded this article, which is on nzpocketguide.com, which is how to book a cheap flight to New Zealand. And so we'll go over some of the main tips that are on there. But to answer your questions very quickly and very simply, the average to get the best price when booking an international flight to New Zealand, from what we have understood, is 47 days prior to flying. So count 47 days before your flight date, and that should be on average the cheapest flight. But very important to compare the different airlines, especially in a post-COVID-19 world, which hopefully will be in October 2021, because at that point you will have some airlines that will really be needing cash and may have some really competitive fares to fly to New Zealand.
Yeah.
Usually the cheapest time of the week to fly is to fly midweek. So if you can aim to either depart or land, Wednesday, Thursdays, those kind of days, even Tuesday works as well. Usually you have cheaper flight because a lot of people do like to fly weekends. So that's usually how you get a bit of a better discount. Now, one of the really good way as well to actually get to save a few hundreds on your flight, or I one time I actually saved $220. That was my best ever. So is to compare flights on like kind of comparison website, and you just have a list of like flights which are quite competitive, and then you call the airlines directly and say, hey, listen, I'm on Skyscanner, for example. I can see that you're having this price or that price and everything. And sometimes the airline will actually match or beat that. And one time I actually did call an airline, and that was Cathay Pacific actually. And I called them and I asked them to match the price, and they said yes. And then I was like, I'm going to try my luck. And Emirates, which I really do not suggest flying with. I do not like Emirates as a personal airline, was a little bit cheaper. And so, but I didn't want to fly with them. So I asked Cathay Pacific, I said, by the way, I see Emirates has a similar route, and they're a little bit cheaper. Can you match that? And they actually ended up saying yes. So from what I saw on Skyscanner, I actually saved 220 New Zealand dollars on my flight. So I thought that was quite cool.
And you got to go with the airline you preferred as well.
Exactly, which is always a bonus. So that's another one of my tips. Well, what other tip do we have here? Oh yeah, be aware of extra fees. So one of the main ways airlines are actually getting you, that's how they get you, is with the airline, the luggage requirement. So be aware of that. You need to have a certain weight for your in-cabin luggage and for your check-in luggage. Yeah. Don't go over. Or if you go over, it's always better to buy it before. We've seen that a lot with the South Pacific. We made those mistakes when you are just arriving at the airport. We're like, I think we'll be fine. It'd be about the same price and everything. And that was $30 more to actually pay for the extra luggage at the airport than it was to actually book it earlier. So here you go. That's a tip.
And there's also just make sure when you're making the booking that you don't make any mistakes on things like your name and stuff when you're making the booking. Because once you get to the airport, for instance, if your name isn't matching what's on your passport and all that sort of thing, they can actually charge you like an extra $100 or something to change the name.
So that happened to us. So I'm just going to give you some context. The way that happened to us is that when I booked the flights, it wasn't really clear which box was first name and which box was last name. And sometimes, like on my French passport, they actually put last name first and then first name second. And so I just typed like it was on my passport because I was copying everything, because you go through like passport number and everything. And I was just copying everything. And just to reverse those two names, and that was the same thing for Laura, it cost us $100 per person. So that was bam, $200 just to change those names. It was just very annoying. So yeah, be aware of that as well. Another tip, which I personally don't use because I find it a bit too hustly, but will actually save you money, is to consider multiple airlines. So let's say you take a flight from wherever you're flying, let's say Europe, and you fly all the way to Hong Kong with Cathay Pacific. A flight from Hong Kong to Auckland without Cathay Pacific may be way cheaper. So basically booking two completely different flights actually quite often end up being cheaper. I personally prefer having everything together because then they handle all your luggage and it's less faff. And I personally prefer that. But if you are okay with the fiddle of having to do all those extra little thing, you may be fine, and you
also
may save some money.
You will find that the cheapest airfares often are when there's been, if you're traveling from Europe, for instance, to New Zealand, usually the cheapest airfares end up being where you've taken 3 stops to get to New Zealand, but it's usually only a minor saving that you make, but the amount of hassle and even getting to New Zealand usually takes a longer time. It's usually like, ends up being like 35 hours when it needed to only be maybe like 30 hours or something. So, so usually it's not always the best idea to go for those super cheap airfares when it does take you extra stops, because the hassle might not, in our opinion, we don't feel like the hassle is really worth it. We'd rather pay like the extra $100 just so we can have a smooth a ride,
especially if you have saved especially if you have saved $200 on before, it's fine to spend the extra 100 on that. And finally, the last thing I want to talk about is using private browsing. So you've heard a lot about VPN, and no, this is not something which is sponsored by whatever VPN. This is not that. I know, like every time I watch a video on YouTube nowadays, it's like,
sponsored by the way, NordVPN,
or secret VPN. I didn't want to say a name because it's not sponsored.
It's not sponsored.
It's not sponsored, but using private browsing or using a VPN actually just allow the airline's website not to track you, because what I've found is that quite often if you keep on watching the same flight, the price go up and everything, and then you go on private browsing and then the price is reset back to like this $10 or $20 or $30 cheaper, because the more you look at it, the more they're kind of like, oh, this person really wants the flight, and they actually do that. So using private browsing in your browser or using a VPN actually is quite helpful. We do not recommend any specific VPNs. This is not a recommendation. If you guys want us to recommend VPN, we do use a certain amount of VPN that we do know and like. But right now, we don't want to recommend any because I'm just sick of hearing about VPNs and those kind of ads. I am sick of VPNs.
And any browser.
And Squarespace. I'm sick of Squarespace as well.
Any browser. I'm pretty sure every browser does have like an option to do private browsing. So
some of them are less good than others. So I would recommend Opera browser, by the way. That's not a sponsored either. But Opera and then in private browsing will be the best option. Anyway. All right. So that is a bunch of tips to find your cheapest flight to New Zealand. I hope that's what helpful to you. Can you say the name of that lovely lady?
LS3 Atomic Vet.
Here you go. I hope that was helpful to you. If it was, you may want to hit the like and subscribe button, because it's a great free way to say thank you for all our hard work. Every time you hit like, it says to YouTube that we're quite useful and nice people. So do that. And if you have a question of your own, you can put it in the comment of any of our videos. We're happy to pick it up and help you out with that. And you can also check out nzpocketguide.com. It is the largest travel guide to New Zealand. It's free to use. It is right from the brain of Laura and I, and I hope that you guys are going to enjoy using the website. Okay, let's go back to the live chat.